Derek wrote in. Derek said, hey, I was wondering what you guys think about Uber, the ride sharing service, Uber. Personally, I can't stand the company. And every time someone says that they use them, it makes me cringe. I can't stand them because of how they use taxi regulations unfairly to make money and how they pay individual workers badly. In general, this entire sharing economy stuff makes me nervous. What are your thoughts? Sharing economy stuff does not make me nervous as broadly speaking at all. Now, as far as Uber goes, I have mixed feelings about Uber. On the one hand, we've talked with economist Richard Wolff and others about how Uber is able to circumvent regulation and have under-licensed and under-regulated cars and drivers because of how they operate. The drivers are independent contractors. Uber is providing a service through which they can be coordinated with people who want rides, and thus it's not organized in the same way as taxi and livery commissions. So I'm sort of against that, right? It's sort of like union busting or strike breaking or whatever. There's analogies to be made there, and I don't like that, no question about it. At the same time, the taxi commissions operate almost like mafias in many cities. If you look in New York City, the cost of there's a limited number of taxi medallions. You can't have more yellow cabs on the road than the number of taxi medallions that they are. As a result, the cost of the taxi medallions has been inflated into the several hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's very, very difficult for anybody but the very rich owner of the cab to get one of these medallions, and then they subcontract out to taxi drivers who take 12 or 8-hour shifts, 2 12-hour shifts or 3 8-hour shifts, and you've still got a rich guy who's really making the money because they're the only one that can afford the taxi medallion. And here in Boston and in New York City, the experiences with taxis are often not that good. I mean, in New York City, before Uber, it was very common that you get into a cab, and even though this is against taxi rules, you say, I'm going to Brooklyn. The cab driver says, I'm not going to Brooklyn. This is technically a violation. You're supposed to be able to be brought anywhere in the 5 boroughs when you get into that taxi cab, and those are sort of the rules. And what a friend of mine started doing when he lived in New York to counteract cab drivers asking you before you get in the cab where you're going, he would get in, close the door, and then say, I'm going to Brooklyn. And then if the cab driver complained, he was already in the car and he said, no problem. Would you like me to call the Taxi and Livery Commission about this? Obviously, that's a whole escalation, sort of a sidebar story. Here in Boston, I don't know anyone who doesn't have a horrific Boston taxi cab story. They don't want to go to East Boston. They sometimes don't want to go to South Boston. They don't want to go to Jamaica Plain, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm really mixed about this. I have used Uber here in the city. I have not taken any cabs here in the city, so all of my stories about the Boston taxi cabs are anecdotal and from what other people have shared. I am very sensitive to both sides on this. I don't like the idea of circumventing regulations and having underinsured and under-licensed drivers and vehicles. At the same time, the way that taxi commissions all over the country operate as monopolies and mafia-like, that has to stop also.
Yeah, well, this is inevitable. These companies are going to be here. They need to be here. This is the natural progression of things. If legislation hasn't caught up, can you really blame Uber? I mean, do we expect them to proactively do everything in their power to make sure that their employees are, I don't know, prospering and all of that? Eventually, this company is going to be all automated cars anyway.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow or the next day. Yeah.
Going to remove people from the equation. So I think this is a great service, and I've used it. Well, while I haven't personally used it on my phone, I've been with people countless times. We've used Uber, and it's been very useful.
Isn't this, though, equivalent to saying, okay, yeah, I understand we're supposed to have these regulations in the insurance market to protect people, pre-existing conditions, all these things. Here's another company who's figured out a way to forego all of these regulations in terms of how premiums are affected by pre-existing conditions, kicking people off plans, increasing prices when people make claims, et cetera, et cetera. But for me personally, because right now I'm really healthy, it's way cheaper for me. Aren't you supporting a system that is hugely problematic, even if for you it's more convenient and better or cheaper?
But all of that can change as long as lawmakers have the will to change it.
Yeah.
And
we know they don't.
Well, maybe they don't. But I guess What am I? Am I just tacitly supporting it now in a way?
I think I am. I mean, I admit that
Yeah.
I use Uber maybe once or twice a month or something like that. The reality is, I mean, think
But
about
just
where
imagine how hard it would be for you to actually get a cab.
I was going to say where our studio is. If I want to get an Uber, it's usually somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. I couldn't tell you where I could go to get a cab here. I mean, I don't know where the closest cab stand is. It could be quite a ways away. This is not a neighborhood where cabs even really go by. So the idea of flagging a cab down on the street in this neighborhood, I mean, it's laughable, right? So yeah, there's real questions around that. Controversial. I can absolutely see both sides of this. Send me your thoughts.